Storya sa? Wait lang.
Like, welcome.
Okay. Wait.
Good morning, everyone. We will be starting our webinar series in a few minutes.
Right. Ready?
Okay, let's go. Ayoko yan. Minute ko sa Discord ko. Classrooms.
Good morning, everyone. Before we start, we would like to send out a few reminders for the duration of the seminar. Please make sure to mute your microphone and turn off your video upon entering the webinar session.
Remember to be polite at all times and no spamming.
If you have questions, please type in the comments section. Questions will be answered at the end of the speaker's discussion.
By joining this event, you agree to participate in a webinar that will also be live streamed in CVU MAOT's official Facebook page.
Also, guys, don't forget to fill out our registration form for this webinar. Link can be found in the chat box.
Where's the link?
All right, next page. So yeah, a warm and a wonderful morning to everyone. Nakapagkape na ba tayong lahat?
I sure do hope so. We are your hosts for today of Onwards Together, Out Weathering the Storm, Part 2, Easing Back to Life. My name is Haya.
And my name is Ken, and I'm pretty sure that everyone is excited to hear the talks of our speakers today. Don't you think so, Haya?
Absolutely. Even me, don't you think so? I mean, before anything else, we would like to request a moment of silence for a prayer, followed by the singing of the national anthem.
Lord, thank you for this day, for the presence of everyone in this call. For once again, we are gathered and given the opportunity to appreciate life and your words. Forgive us for our shortcomings and cleanse our hearts as we learn and live your words and example. Father, bless our endeavors, especially today's meeting. May you guide us in our discussions, and may you enlighten our minds in every decision that we make. Give us your grace that we may effectively do our parts for your greater glory. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, ewas ang sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa dagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng pagaw, ay hinatang tulakaw,
Hello once again to everyone, and welcome to a brand new season of Spotlight on Air.
Ayan, so we are now on the day 2 of our webinar series entitled Crossing the Bridge, and boy, do we have a treat for you guys.
Our speakers for today will be tackling topics on disaster amid the pandemic and how to cope up with stress after a disaster.
Now that sounds very timely, Haya, especially after what Cebu has gone through the devastating audit habang meron pang pandemic ngayon, di ba?
I agree, parang maraming participants ngayon na makaka-relate. But before we move on to our topic for today, let's have a quick recap of what happened on day 1 webinar. So sa pagkakaalala ko, there was a discussion about families on how to plan for children and adults, yung may mga special needs, and by providing ideas on how to take care of them during an emergency.
And next page, please. And actually, they were also given information on how to best prepare for disasters sa mga families na may PWDs na kasama for general disaster preparedness and tips and best practices para makapagplano sila. It was also discussed on how to plan for the care of people with disabilities or special needs during natural calamities.
Ayan, tapos lastly, I believe there was a disability awareness of disaster risk. Before we forget po, a brief reminder to all our participants to register through the link found in the chat box below and our Facebook page, CDUMAOT. There is something waiting for you at the end of the webinar. Also, there will be a feedback form after the program, so we request everyone to fill that out in order to receive your certificates.
Tapos if you guys have any questions, it will be entertained after every speaker, so please do not hesitate to put in your questions in the chat box below. And also remember guys that we have prizes in store for you, so stay tuned in today's webinar.
Okay, before we start, we would like to see some engagement in the audience. Okay.
Ayan, tingnan natin kung sino yung mga audiences natin. And let's have an attendance check muna, Haya. Let's see.
All right, we have heart sent here by Mary de Guzman. We also have Kat Salazar sending us a heart. So guys, tawag nito, click thumbs up, the gesture if you're settled down na and okay. Tapos send us some heart reacts if you're excited or feeling the love at this moment.
And happy naman or smiling react if you feel elated and enthusiastic for today's webinar.
Ayan, hello to Rachel May Kilaton and then Aubrey. Can the participants chat where you guys are coming from? It would be interested for us to know asan kayo nakikinig or from what part of the Philippines or what part of the world you are.
Ayan, si Ma'am Karine, may like, react, heart, and smiley face. Overwhelmed.
Ayan, sabi ni Ma'am Karine din, hi from Cebu. We also have Aubrey from California. Wow, so parang ang layo pala ng nararating ng webinar na to.
Hindi lang sa Philippines, Haya. Pati sa California nakarating tayo.
Ayun nga eh. Mr. Gabriel also sent us a heart react. Hi from Pampanga daw, sabi niya.
And from Miss
Miss
Rachel, hi
Rachel
from
from
Davao
Davao.
City.
Yes. And then there's Justin from Cavite. Hello, hi. So parang medyo malayo-layo talaga ang mga narating ng webinar na to. Oh.
Oo.
So, thank you everyone sa mga nag-react. We can really see. Oy, meron pa isa from Maryland. Hello. I believe that's in near or nasa Washington yan. So thank you everyone sa mga nag-react. We can really see how active our participants are, no? So same feels lang mo naman din sa amin ang excitement ng mga participants. Now to formally proceed to our webinar, why don't we tell the audience what they will be in for today's webinar?
Alright, tignan natin yung mga objectives ng webinar natin. So first and foremost, One is to discuss the after effects of disaster amidst COVID and the different medical management post-COVID. So
Then we also
for the
have the
second objective,
discussion.
discuss stress
Uh,
management during and after disasters and handling and coping with trauma.
And then third is to educate on the psychosocial organizations and support groups for mental health. And lastly, we'll be talking about the role of OT in disaster risk reduction. Now, Kenneth, meron ka bang idea who our speakers are going to be for today?
Actually, meron akong slight idea pero ang pagkakaalam ko yung mga speakers natin are well-versed sa mundo ng COVID and sa DRRM and how to handle them.
Oo nga, parang interesting yung mga magiging speaker natin today, ano?
Yeah.
So, pwede ba natin ipakita naman ngayon sa audience yung pictures ng mga natin? Yung mga speakers, okay?
So yeah, and in today's webinar, we will be joined by our distinguished guests. Our first speaker will be talking about the after effects of disaster amidst COVID and the medical management post-COVID by Dr. Adorable.
Our second speaker will be discussing stress management during and after disasters, and we'll be talking about coping with trauma, and then siya rin yung mag-share ng mga organizations and support groups for mental well-being, si Ms. Tricia Gotinga. And lastly, we will be joined by our final guests for an FGD. So it's Ms. Joyce Rosales and Ms. Minerva Lagria.
Ayan, so now that we've introduced our speakers, I think kailangan muna natin ng little icebreaker.
I think tamang-tama lang yan. Would anyone from the audience want to receive 250 pesos via GCash? So if you were with us at yesterday's seminar, all you have to do is guess the prizes that we gave away yesterday.
Ayan, so 250 pesos, marami din tayo mabibili niyan from Shopee, Lazada, or kaya pang order ng GrabFood for our breakfast or lunch. So yan guys, you can now scan the QR code flashed on the screen and enter the number code to join in. And remember that we'll be giving 2 minutes for you guys to enter this game. Remember to enter your official name. Yung full name po natin, wala pong mga cute nicknames or pet names dahil kapag i-claim po natin yung prizes natin, ayan yung gagamitin natin na receipt. Yan.
Yeah, so guys, scan now. You have 2 minutes to join in. For the winner of this little icebreaker, take a screenshot of the leaderboard and send it to the Facebook page of CDUMA to claim your prize.
And guys, nasa chat box din yung link ng ating Menti link.
Tell me if go na.
Ayan, tell me how many participants do we have ba? We have 8 people, 9 people right now.
Ayan, 9 people na. Come on guys, join in. Sayang yung 250 pesos.
Yes, 250 pesos din yan.
Ayan,
We have 10.
10.
Okay, the participants are climbing up. The game is easy, guys. Like, parang you just have to guess the prizes na binigay namin yesterday. And if you were there, alam nyo, or if you've been watching kanina sa tawag nito, sa loop video of our sponsors, dun yung makikita yung mga questions yung mga answers sa questions namin for today. Di ba,
Actually,
Kenneth?
huhulaan lang pala tapos may prize ka na. Oo, kaso bawal eh. Bigay na natin sa mga dear participants natin yung game na yan.
Yes.
Okay, malapit na matapos yung time. Come on guys, habol na.
We have 15.
And we have 15.
Okay, ready na bang lahat? We will be starting our game.
Okay.
Ayan. So for the first product, ano yan? You guys have to just guess.
Ano kaya yan? Nasa kamay. Tapos, ako as a pediatric practitioner, Haya, parang tingin ko Play-Doh eh.
Parang ano?
Play-Doh.
Ayan. Okay, so ano ba yung answer ngayon? The first one is wala pang results.
Ayan na, question 1. Let's see. Tapos guys, nga pala, kapag mas mabilis kayong sumagot dito, mas mataas yung points. So yan, BTS milk tea, Euphoria candles, or Mucho milk tea. So yan, lahat sila nakakuha ng tama. BTS milk tea. 9 participants ang nakakuha. Good job, guys.
Okay, now for the second item, second question, I believe.
So ang leaderboards natin, nangunguna si Shane Pondok, followed by Michelle and Justin Pudente. Ayan, for the next one.
Okay. Tapos the third, ano ba yon? I mean, second item pa lang to, di ba? Yes, tama.
Yan,
We
it's the
have
second
9
item. Yan.
participants na nakakuha ng Euphoria candle.
Tignan natin
And
yung
then,
leaderboards ulit.
sino natin ngayon?
Ayan na, nag-iba na yung top 1 natin. Si Vix ang
Talaga?
nangunguna ngayon. Ayan, yeah.
Very
same
nice,
top
very
1 to
nice,
3.
very nice.
Oh, may isa pa, guys. Ayan, almost the same lang siya ng una natin, yung first na question natin. So, tatlo lang naman yun. Tingnan na lang natin, i-infer na lang natin kung ano kaya yun. BTS milk tea, Euphoria candle, or Mucho milk tea? Ayan, oh, Mucho milk tea. Very good, guys.
Kita na ba natin kung sino nanalo, Ken?
Ayan, sa leaderboard natin, ayan, Justin Prudente.
Sino?
Okay, Justin Prudente.
Siya na ba yung winner natin? Alright, take a
Yeah,
screenshot
siya na
right
yung
now
winner
and send
natin.
that to the CDU-MAOT page. Thank you everyone who participated, and don't worry, we have more prizes to give away later.
And guys, so stay tuned. Meron pa tayo mamaya. May pag-games pa tayo and raffle draw.
Okay, so let's get down to business. I think let's not make our listeners wait any longer. Our first speaker for today is a medical specialist of the Rehabilitation Department in Vicente Soto Memorial Medical Center. He is also a dean in the Rehab Science Department of Southwestern University, FINMA in Cebu. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Lohindren V. Adorable.
Good morning and happy Sunday to each and every one of you. And I'm glad to be with the OTs this morning, even if it's a Sunday morning. I think, had it not for Gwen, well, you know, it's a Sunday, but of course, I cannot say no to Gwen. And of course, to the team members of the rehab, it's very important really to be sharing what we have at Vicente Soto. I see Joy Kadampog, who used to be our students. Some of the participants here are faculty, used to be faculty like Gwen and Joyce, a speaker, or I think the facilitator of the focus group discussion this morning. She used to be our faculty. Okay, can I share now my screen?
Yes, Doc.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what you had yesterday was more on the nitty-gritty of disaster management. But I think it was a prelude to the discussion this morning from specific to general, because this morning I'm going to talk about the generalities of disasters. So I was tasked to talk on the after effects of disasters amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, and later on, the medical management for post-COVID-19, or what we call the long haulers or the long COVID. So I will start with a definition of disaster, which is really a misnomer. You will know later on why is it a misnomer. Types of disaster, probably a little review on the negative effects of disaster, and of course, the after effects or the impact of disaster, especially the impact of Typhoon Odette in our city and in our province. Then after that, the COVID infection in the context of the International Classification of Functioning and the algorithm that we use to work for the cardiopulmonary rehab of COVID-19 patients. The acute phase in retrospect, although we're still seeing acute phase this time, the long haulers and the management of long haulers. So what is disaster? Why did I say it's a misnomer? Everything, if you are not prepared in any event, you are the outcome would be a disaster. That's why you failed in the exam, and if not, actually all of us used to be students, may it be in the bachelor's or in the graduate programs. But if we are not prepared for the exams, we fail, and we call it, oh, it was really a disaster. So even an event like a wedding or a birthday party, if it was not organized well, it becomes a disaster. So meaning to say, there's no such thing as really a disaster if we are prepared. Because United Nations defines disaster as a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or society which involves widespread human, material, economic, or environment impacts that exceed the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. So any one of us, any country in the world, are exposed to hazard events. And we become vulnerable, and if we're not ready for that, then it will come out to be a disaster. That's why, for me, when we say disasters, we call typhoons, volcanic eruptions as natural disasters. Actually, these are misnomers. These are hazard events. So it becomes, the disaster term here is just a misnomer. So what are the types of disaster? Of course, the number one is the natural disaster, which is increasing as a result of the climate change. So these are naturally occurring physical phenomena caused either by rapid or slow onset events that have immediate impacts on human health, like floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and the like. It has primary impact on human health, as well as secondary impacts causing further deaths and suffering from landslides, fires, and so on. It is characterized by magnitude or intensity. That's why we have the intensity of earthquake on a Richter scale, speed or onset, duration, and area of the extent. Whereas the man-made disaster are events caused by humans, which occur in or close to human settlements, often caused as a result of environmental or technological emergencies. These are the environmental degradation, pollution, technological or industrial emergencies like the large forest fire, and of course, part now of Ukraine being invaded by Russia is the Chernobyl city of Ukraine, which used to be the site of the worst nuclear disaster in 1986. I hope some of you were already born by the time. And then the fallout of that disaster had reached not just Europe, but parts of Asia and parts of North America.
Hello, Doc. Excuse me po. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Your PowerPoint is not moving, Doc.
Sorry. Is it now moving? I'm now on complex emergencies.
Wait lang po. Confirm ko with the tech team. Not yet, Doc. Hindi pa rin daw po gumagalaw.
Sorry.
Pwede po
I'm
siyang
already
i-stop and then share again. Ayan, okay
Stop.
po. And then share
And then
again, Doc.
Share again. How about that? Can you see
Okay
my
na, Doc.
slides
Yes
now?
Mhm. Thank you
Okay.
po. Sorry.
Welcome. So the other type of disaster, these are the complex emergencies. This is actually based on the classification of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent. So complex emergencies are multiple hazards with a combination of natural and man-made causes, which involve breakdown of authority, looting, and attacks on strategic installations. That includes conflict and war, of course, like now, where hopefully it's not going to become a World War III. It may somehow involve food insecurity, epidemics later on, armed conflicts, and displaced population. So it is characterized by extensive violence, displacement of population. So if you look at World War II and World War I, World War I lasted for about 4 years with 11 million deaths, compared to the Second World War, which lasted from 1939 about 6 years with 15 million deaths. The other are the pandemics. Of course, we're now in the period of pandemic. I do not say that we're now in post-pandemic period, because we're still experiencing an increased cases of COVID-19. So if you look at the history of pandemics in the world, there are pandemics which lasted like 20 or 25 years. God forbid, COVID wouldn't be that long, hopefully. But we know that in the later part of the 20th and the 21st century, we're now in the 21st century, the duration of pandemic has been decreasing, probably because of an improved healthcare system, and at the same time, more readiness to this. Even if, in the past 2 years, we were empty-handed when COVID-19 pandemic came, but we're struggling and to continue with our own lives. What about disaster over disaster? Or we have a, kumbaga, if I remember last December, it was really a punishment from heaven. But it's not really a punishment from heaven, because we had COVID, we were physically distanced, and then we didn't have any connection after Odette. So during pandemic, connectivity was very important, but it was cut by Odette, and we could not anymore contact our loved ones. So it took time, especially for those outside the country, to contact their loved ones here, and they're asking friends here to look for their family, especially their status. So there are disasters in 2020 and 2021. So
Hi, Doc.
this
Sorry
means,
po ulit to interrupt. Your PowerPoint po ulit, yung naka-freeze po ulit siya. Nasa complex emergencies pa rin po.
oh my God. How about that?
Complex emergencies and pandemic emergencies. Ayan, Doc. Paano na lang po ulit? Thank you po.
Welcome. How about that? Is it moving now? Okay, so
Not yet po, Doc.
not yet.
Opo.
How about that?
And Doc, nasa slide na po siya ng disasters during COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so as I said earlier, during pandemic 2020 and 2021, and the early part of 2022, the number of disasters all throughout the world has not changed. So if you look at the number of the events, it's almost the same as the previous years. So meaning to say, with or without pandemic, we are always vulnerable to the disasters. So the deadliest among them in 2020 were the flash flood in Pakistan with 400 deaths. Now, what about the negative effects of the disaster, especially during pandemic? So we all know that people are affected during pandemic, and the humanitarian crisis may involve actually those people will be moving out of the disaster area. I can remember during Odette that some of Cebuanos went to Manila because there was no electricity here, there was no water, so they had to move out of Cebu province. So that's the reason why probably we have refugees, temporary refugees in areas outside of the disaster. And the displacement, like in the world, in last year's disasters, there were about 30.7 million who were actually displaced. And much so in times of war, there are more displaced. In fact, right now, there are more than 2 million Ukrainians outside of Ukraine moving to Poland and the other European countries nearby. What about the public health crisis? So we know that the immediate effect, of course, are physical injuries, and we seldomly see infection in the first or second or third day of after the disaster, because most of the incubation periods of infectious diseases are within 24 or 72 hours. So we are so concerned about the immediate effects on physical injuries. So the impact phase on the first 4 days would be mostly deaths, of course, injuries, and we get to see infection only on the 4th day to the 4th week. Then after that, of course, as the post-disaster era lingers, what will happen, it's not just the infectious disease that we will be facing, but also psychosocial instability. So most of the deaths on the impact phase are due to hypothermia, dehydration, injury. At the site, of course, on the second phase, you have the infectious diseases. And more infectious diseases, the longer the incubation period, more infectious diseases may probably set in the succeeding weeks. And the most common of the psychosocial problem, very challenging, especially to occupational therapists, are the post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you look at the number of deaths from disasters, it has actually decreased, probably as a result of preparedness and at the same time, an improved healthcare system. Gone are the days that you had like 300,000 or almost 500,000 or 400,000 deaths as a result of natural disasters. Well, environmental factors problems as the effect of disaster, we see a lot. I think we experienced that in December of last year. When we go around, we see a lot of infrastructures damaged by the earthquake. And what about the impact on disasters on individuals and the community? So for the individuals, especially for those with pre-existing challenges with their economic status, like poverty, and they can be discriminated, or they can be separated from their family. There could also be loss of lives and livelihoods. Some of them, their employers wouldn't anymore accept them because there's no business after the disaster. Probably the factory has been eliminated into the ground by the typhoon. Humanitarian response induced, it could be overcrowding, lack of privacy, undermining of community or traditional support. Well, on the mental issues, there may be some of them may already have pre-existing mental problems, which can be somehow doubled or somehow aggravated by the disaster. Or, of course, humanitarian response induced could include anxiety due to lack of information about food distribution or about how to obtain basic services. So I think some of the speakers later on will talk about coping mechanism for after disaster. On economy, there could be a big impact depending on the devastation on the infrastructures as well as the health system. During Typhoon Odette, if about 10.8 million people were affected across the Philippines, with 405 people and 405 people died with thousands injured. But if you look at the cases of COVID before Odette, it was actually almost nadir, but in December, in January, there was a peak. This is probably because of the Omicron variant, but this cannot be attributed to Typhoon Odette because worldwide there was really a surge of Omicron. What about in Cebu province? The workforce were affected because some employers closed down their business for the meantime. And again, if you look at the province, it reflects on the cases of COVID in the province is also similar to the trend nationally and worldwide. So there was no surge during the time when Odette came, and the surge that came after could not perfectly be attributed to Odette. So Cebu City was greatly damaged. Again, even if mask was already not a thing that time, when you are queuing in the gas station, in the ATM for water, some of them were not anymore wearing masks, or there was anymore no physical distancing. But again, as I said, it cannot be attributed to an increase in the cases and number of deaths during COVID. So therefore, what is very important for us is just to be resilient and be ready. Remember that the economic losses as a result of disaster has tripled in the past 30 years. And natural disasters may somehow be doubled, especially in the low and middle income countries. And the losses from disasters about 1.2 trillion, which is equivalent to the GDP of Mexico, is one country. 1/3 of the official development aid from Western countries were given for the disaster. Well, in fact, if this can already be used for infrastructures, improvement of infrastructures, the better. So if we can eliminate this 1/3, we can somehow infuse this budget to other projects in our country. The disasters before resulted in 2.3 million deaths. And in the next 40 years, 2.6 billion people will be affected, and 90% of them are in South Asia and Africa. And between now and 2050, more people, or twice of those affected by typhoon and other disasters, would be affected, about 1.5 billion people by 2050. So I think what's very important is just to focus on our resilience. Resilience means it's not only the psychosocial aspect of our human or our well-being, but also this resilience of the community. So we really have to invest on disaster. When you say invest, be prepared, even including some features for preparedness in the building code, some features of preparedness even in the academic community, because it was only then during pandemic that we were asked to prepare a learning continuity plan so that we can proceed with our instruction online, and now we're doing it face-to-face in a flexible schedule. Okay, so those are the impacts of disaster. And how will it impact on, especially in times when there is COVID? So I think COVID being a pandemic and a disaster should be addressed medically And the only difference between the natural disaster and COVID, as I said, it lingers for 4 years. Even the longest was about 20 or 25 years pandemic. So I hope COVID will not be that long. So if I believe you are familiar with the International Classification of Functioning, COVID affects the different systems of our body. It actually first affects the lungs, which would impair our functional expiratory capacity, meaning all the lung volumes and the lung capacity will be affected as a result of hyaline chains or fibrosis later on after the infection. And because of difficulty, some of them are just seated, and then when you ask them to take a bath, to even just to don or doff their garments, they get breathless. So meaning there is an inherent problem within the lungs sometimes that we cannot diagnose in the clinics. So we make use of, because of this, they cannot move around. Their activities of daily living are somewhat limited, so that becomes a disability. Because here in the Philippines, sometimes we look at disability as something that is physical. But even for those who are very, very young, very, very active, they are actually disabled, especially for the long COVID ones, the long haulers, because they have experienced breathlessness or easy fatigability. So the quality of life becomes affected. So they become a handicap as a result of COVID-19. So in the acute stage, we do cardiopulmonary rehabilitation, and we focus on, we classify our patients as to whether they are with mild disease or moderate to severe disease that require hospitalization. So even in the ICU or in the COVID wards, we perform rehabilitation. Actually, what we see here are practically more of pulmonary physical therapy, but in our setting, our occupational therapists went into the red zone or COVID area to address the depression, anxiety. They have tools, they were using tools for this, and they were addressing these problems because some of our patients had actually undergone depression. And sometimes when they got out of the hospital, they could never, being in the hospital confined, isolated, alone inside the room, and it is a hospital, it's not their house. So they could not even, they're not anymore oriented, they cannot even recognize the family members. Of course, the other medication are purely medical, which are listed on the right. So it's what's very important then during their treatment was they had to be provided enough auto supplementation when our OTs facilitated ADLs, because as I said earlier, a little movement could already make them a little bit dyspneic or they easily get fatigued. So these were what we were doing during the acute phase. And are my slides moving at this time? Okay, so I hope it's moving. So in retrospect, we believe that we thought that the mild disease would last only for about 2 weeks, the moderate to severe disease would last about 3 to 6 weeks, and the critical disease, well, it may vary. But the studies have shown later on that regardless on the classification of COVID, may it be mild, moderate, severe, or critical, they have the same post-COVID symptoms. So it doesn't really matter. The severity of COVID doesn't really reflect on the severity also of the post-COVID symptoms, because early studies had shown that there were, even after 60 days, they already had, they still had persistent symptoms like dyspnea or shortness of breath, cough, loss of smell or taste, and so on. So last month in February, the latest statistics on that were most of the post-COVID or the long COVID symptoms were more on fatigue and a little of breathlessness and brain fog. So this was reported in the first week of February. So because of that, WHO has defined long COVID as symptoms after infection that lasts more than 12 weeks and not explained by another diagnosis. And what we usually do, because of some of the patients do not have really abnormality on ECG tracing, do not have abnormality even in pulmonary function tests. So we push them to a certain beyond their usual physical activity, and we put them on a cardiopulmonary exercise test. That's the reason why all over the world, cardiopulmonary test parameters become the vital signs of patients recovering from COVID-19. And right now we're doing a study on that, and we are monitoring the COVID patients admitted in late of last year during the Delta surge. We're monitoring them in 3 months, 6 months, and hopefully in a year's time. So we will check on their cardiopulmonary exercise test parameters. And right now, there are actually no specific treatment for the long COVID yet. We are following a certain algorithm for the management. It's all supportive. And I think it may take time for us to come up with the definitive treatment for long COVID. As I said, it's symptomatic and supportive treatment only. But I think what the bottom line is, we will really make this patient functional again. So cardiopulmonary rehabilitation, it may sound like very physical therapy, but guys, it's very important that occupational therapy should understand the cardiopulmonary status of the patient, especially that they don't actually exercise at home. What they usually do at home and at work is, of course, activities of daily living, performing their job, and that's the most important for them, because for them to earn for a living. And you should be facilitating these individuals cope with not just the psychosocial aspects of being a post-COVID patient, but you have to focus also on a little of physical, even if it's actually the world of physical therapists. But I think occupational therapists, before you do any intervention, you have to take note of their functional capacities, especially the cardiopulmonary aspect of it. So I think what's very important, may it be in a pandemic, or may there be another disaster on a pandemic, sometimes I think it's a given fact that most of you will focus on the psychosocial aspect, but please focus also on the physical aspect. Do not just leave it to the physical therapist. Thank you. I'm just wondering if the
Hello, Doc. Thank you so much. It's Haya here. Thank you so much for the presentation, Doc. It was really very informative, and sorry po sa mga interruptions namin kanina.
But I just want to make sure if slides were actually seen in the later part.
The later part, Doc. I think it's the tech team that's seeing, Doc. Ako medyo maano po yung internet ko ngayon. So I think my part of the internet po rin kasi medyo nagkakaproblema. But I believe it was...
In terms of the slides din po, Doc, nag-stop po siya dun sa may COVID.
Okay. But we have a good connectivity here in Talisay anyway.
It's fine, Doc.
Pero
Okay
Doc,
lang po yan.
besides the...
Ano?
Ayun po, it was very informative po. And even though yung mga slides medyo nag-stop, we got a lot of information po.
Okay, thank you.
Ayan. So ayun po, I believe it's time for a question and answer. So we have here, Doc, a couple of questions from the audience. Let me just pull it up. So, first question po, were there any changes you noticed regarding the disaster management in response to COVID?
Hi. So I got the question. So I think what's very important, just COVID is similar to other diseases, no? And the medical team that goes to the disaster area, the area where there's a disaster, is mindful of the infectious diseases. That is, infectious diseases that are yet to develop as an effect or as the aftermath of disaster. But I think what the advantage this time is because there's already there's already a way of doing the way of managing COVID patients prior to the onset of other disasters like the one that we had here in Cebu during that time. So of course, if we look at the framework, especially the framework of disaster management, I hope you're familiar with the Sendai framework of disaster management. The health system has to be beefed up prior to onset of at any time of the year, because for us to be resilient and to be ready for any disaster, we're talking about the readiness of the healthcare providers or professional, as well as the healthcare facilities, even the number of beds. Right now in Vicente Soto and here in Cebu, we have dedicated wards for that. So anytime that there is a surge, anytime that there could be other infections, we already have a separate wing for that. So we're using it for other conditions right now because we don't have the surge. But when a surge, if there's going to be another surge, then we will have just to make use of those wards. It's a negative pressure ward.
Oh,
So that's part of the
I
management.
okay. That's very how do I say this? Very nice, Doc. No, I mean, especially when you mentioned that in case of any other search, lalo na po ngayon na parang may naririnig din ako. I've been reading up on stuff, and there might be actually another surge if for another variant, I believe. But I'm not sure
Yeah,
how true it is.
you're right, but it's not actually as fatal as the Delta. So just
Okay.
like Omicron, last December, January, and February, there was a surge, but we were able to manage it. And as I said, right now, we do not have that number of patients compared to 2020 and 2021. So we are
Yeah.
vacating the red zones now.
Mm, okay. For the next question po, Doc, naman, what do you think needs improvement po in terms of responding to COVID during um, occurring disasters po?
Yeah, I think I'm not going to make a very, very drastic comment in what happened actually in December in Cebu, because there was no sort of orientation or community education on what to do during a disaster during the time of pandemic like COVID. But I think it's actually a common sense for each one of us that we know for a fact that there is still COVID. So we have to practice the health safety protocols all the time, regardless as to whether there's a pandemic, there's a disaster or not. So if you look at, even if I would say that we cannot attribute the surge last December, January, and February to not following the health safety protocols after Odette. But what if it wasn't an Omicron? It was a Delta that time. So we will be seeing it, the city of Cebu, the province of Cebu, and those affected by Odette would be like another India. So I think we have to educate the community that it would remain the same. Just like with or without a disaster, we just have to follow the health safety protocols. Because guys, our physical and occupational therapist in Vicente Soto never became positive in 2020 and 2021. We only had positive PTs and OTs in the late part of 2021 and this year because they were already immersed into the community. And they forgot to follow the health safety protocols, especially if they are with their friends. Well, I'm also guilty of that. And some of you probably are also guilty. When you are with friends, you make beso na because it's already post-pandemic. No, but COVID is still there. So we just have to follow the health safety protocols.
Okay. As what I've heard, Doc, so parang importante po talaga yung education po, no? And then each and every one of us have to be responsible in our very own ways because, again, we are not yet out of the pandemic. So ito naman po,
Yes.
next question, Doc. Tawag nito, I think it's from a rehab practitioner din po. So the question is, as OTs po, should we be expecting a significant rise in the number of cardiopulmonary patients in the upcoming years due to the effects of COVID? And how can we equip future and current OTs po?
Yeah, that's a good question because as I emphasize it in my lecture that well, OTs are really good in, well, sometimes you overthink that the problem is more on the psychosocial aspect of the person. But as I said, even donning and doffing of upper and lower body garments, when I get into the room of a COVID patient, or even now, I'm doing a cardiopulmonary exercise test in about almost 100 of post-COVID patients now, 3 months after 6 months. They are still experiencing breathlessness, and they cannot even strain during defecation because they get dizzy, they get breathless in doing that. So some of them could not even go up the stairs when they used to do that when they didn't have before COVID. So it's very important that what physical therapists are doing, you also have to do that, like pulmonary rehabilitation. It's good that the curriculum of the bachelor's degree of OT this time has a bigger number of units for cardiopulmonary occupational therapy. I think during your time, I don't know. Yeah, I believe so. During your time, there was no subject like cardiopulmonary occupational therapy. So you look at your curriculum now, it's one big subject in a semester. So it's very timely. We are preparing the OTs, the future OTs, and we hope also that the present OTs would engage in cardiopulmonary rehabilitation because occupational, occupational activities requires oxygen, and it requires energy. It should have an energy expenditure that sometimes exceed what they used to do in a day-to-day activity. So for you guys, I hope you can incorporate your cardiopulmo in your intervention.
Actually, Doc, your answer po was very comprehensive. Parang natakal po talaga lahat na kailangan natin tignan yung mga patients natin not only sa psychosocial aspect, we need to look at them very holistically. Parang dapat wala po tayong nile-left out, and na banggit nyo rin po yung parang relationship between disasters and COVID. Tapos kung paano po natin ma-manage and what should we do. And as practitioners po, yung last question, it was very enlightening po na parang ito po yung mga mas magandang kailangan gawin. And I do agree nga po doon na ngayon po at this time, dapat magbigay rin po tayo ng emphasis doon sa cardiopulmonary rehab. Kasi may iba po na parang nakasama na po kasi siya sa adult physical dysfunction setting. Parang it's like ilang lessons lang. Para mas maganda po if ma-cover in detail yung mga meds, mga activities na pwedeng i-provide. So yun po. Right, Haya?
Yes, absolutely.
So yun po. Now po, Doc, to present po a certificate of appreciation. The The certificate is awarded to Dr. Henry V. Adorable, MD, DPBRM, FPARM, for sharing their expertise on their webinar series, Spotlight Season 3. Onwards Together, Outweathering the Storm. Episode Crossing the Bridge, Easing Back to Life, held on March 27, 2022 via Zoom. And Doc, so is it okay po if we have a little photo op for our certificate?
Thank you, Kenneth and Haya.
Thank you rin po, Doc. All right, hold the smile for like a couple of seconds, Doc.
1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Doc.
Okay, thank you po, Doc. Thank you for that wonderful talk.
Thank you also for the opportunity.
Ayan, for next slide, please. Ayan, Haya. So speaking of disasters nga na sabi ni Doc, meron tayong mga natural calamity, meron din tayong pandemic, no? Speaking of disasters, do you remember seeing the news dati about yung bagyong Odette?
Yes, actually nandito ako nun sa Manila when I saw the news, and it was very stressful sa part ko because I have family in Cebu. My parents are there, and actually tumawag sila nung gabing yon, and then they said, anak, it's we're okay here and all that, and then suddenly nangyari na putol yung call. So amidst that, parang I was so stressed out with the fact that I couldn't be there for my family, lalo na kailangan nila ako. Ayun.
Oo. Actually, ayun nga, kahit ako din kasi nandito rin ako sa Manila. So it's stressful for us kahit na wala tayo dun sa Cebu or dun sa pinakatinamaan ng bagyo. Kasi ramdam natin maski dito sa malayo. Tapos yung, ayun nga, pag may family members ka, parang nakaka-stress talaga. Minsan di mo na alam yung gagawin mo, paano ba sila makakontak. So yun, parang ayun yung pag-uusapan natin with our next speaker. So our next speaker, next slide please, is here to talk about stress management during and after disasters. She'll be talking to us on how people who experience such trauma and how to cope up after such a disaster. Ayan, so she's an associate in DMR Psychological Services and a faculty member in Our Lady of Fatima University. Ladies and gentlemen, may we present Ms. Tricia Joy Ogotinga, MA, RPM, and RSI. Round of applause po.
Hi, good morning, everybody. First and foremost, am I audible? Can you hear me clearly? All
Yes
right.
po, ma'am.
Permission to share my screen. Hold on. Oops, wait. Hold on. Yeah. There. All right. What are you seeing? Is it the big screen or the small screen?
The big screen
The big
po.
screen po, ma'am.
Okay, just to make sure that mine is moving. Yan. Okay. Yan. Is the animation working? Yan.
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay, sige. I'll just go back to the first slide. Okay. Thank you, Haya, and thank you, Kenneth. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Before anything else, I would like to say my warmest regards to everyone here present, and especially to the students of Masters of Arts in Occupational Therapy of Cebu Doctors University, to the organizing committee, Miss Mary Pauline, May Senyo, Miss Katrina Salazar, and the rest of the team. As I was able to mention your name, my heartfelt gratitude to talk about this pressing issue, which is stress in the context of the disaster. And also to my co-speakers, Dr. Adorable, thank you for your meaningful discussion. And also hello to Miss Rosales and Miss Langria. Today I will discuss with everyone disaster and understanding the characteristic of the disaster. Moreover, I want you to be acquainted with the different techniques of managing stress and outline some ways to cope after a disaster. And lastly, I want you to be familiarized with various organizations in Central Visayas which can offer psychosocial support during and after the disaster. And as part of my transparency for this discussion, the points of view that I'm going to share are based on theoretical concepts from reputable sources, conferences and trainings that I attended, and my volunteer experience as a mental health professional and in the event of the disaster. Before I begin, I wanted to state that the views that I will express are my own and not necessarily those of the institutions that I represent or the organizing committee. All right. So let's turn our attention to the screen. What are you seeing? Yeah. You're seeing
A vase po na may plant.
yeah, vase and the plant. So, sige, let's focus our attention to that vase and the plant. And I want to invite everyone, if you're not driving, if you're just sitting in your room, inside your room, you have an adequate space with you and there's less distraction, I am inviting you to have this exercise. And just make sure that you are not mobile or driving. And the goal of this brief exercise is to direct your attention not to the vase and the plant, but to the breathing. Okay. Shall we do that? Okay. So I want you to turn now your attention, okay, to your breath while allowing your thoughts and feelings to pass by. You may close your eyes if you want. And then we'll begin. And the goal of this brief exercise is to direct your attention to your breath. Focus on your sensation as your sensations will come and go. Try to locate a comfortable place to sit. Place your feet flat on the ground and try to maintain a straight posture. Close your eyes gently. It's a good place to start. Allow your shoulders to drop down away from your ears. Pay attention to your breathing and simply allow yourself to continue breathing naturally. Now gently place your hands on your belly with your fingertips of each hand lightly touching the middle. Try to inhale slowly and smoothly through your nose. Then exhale slowly through your mouth. Try to breathe. Continue to take it slowly. When you breathe in, notice how your belly pushes your hands gently apart as you fill your lower lungs with air. As you exhale, notice how your belly sinks back towards your spine. You can visualize your stomach as a balloon. Fill it with air and then watch it deflate. Continue breathing. You may also become aware of the physical sensations or feelings in your body. Just simply be aware of them. And then bring back your attention to your breathing once more. Feelings have any meaning in this moment, just try to simply acknowledge them without passing judgment. Return your attention to your breathing. If your mind wanders, that's fine. Simply recognize that your mind has wandered and gently bring it back. Return your focus to your breathing. Continue to concentrate on your breathing and remain its relaxed condition for as long as you like. When you hear the ringing of a bell, you may open your eyes. Hello, how's everybody? Are you feeling relaxed? All good? Baka nakatulog. Okay lang if medyo nakatulog ng konti. Try to notice how you're feeling after. Are you feeling sleepy? If your mind wandered, that's perfectly fine. And later on, we'll talk about this. That is a part of an exercise of mindful breathing. And later on, I'll talk about more of that when I discuss stress management techniques. But I wanted to start first talking about disasters. Okay. We had a good start already, and I just wanted to emphasize disaster. World Health Organization defined disaster as a serious disruption of the functioning of a society and causing a widespread human, material, and environmental losses, which exceed the ability of the affected society to cope using only its own resources. As a result of the disaster, normal living patterns, even economic activity, and communication systems are frequently disrupted. Extraordinary demands for maybe food, shelter, clothing, medical care, and other essential care services may inevitably occur. If we try to take a look closely, geographically, Philippines is situated in a Pacific Ring of Fire and on the typhoon belt of the Pacific Ocean's North Pacific Basin. We also have one of the world's largest fault zones and a vast coastline, making us naturally exposed to calamities. There are studies to show that between 1980s and 2010, we have been hit over of 380 natural disasters. And yeah, now let's unpack the phases of disaster and how this impact our well-being, specifically our mental well-being. A disaster, regardless of the type, has three major phases: the pre-impact phase, the impact phase, and the post-disaster phase. And then later on, I'll relate it on feelings and behaviors involved, no, in these phases of disasters. In the pre-impact phase, it consists of the following. We have the consolidation phase and the warning phase. In consolidation phase, this is the period wherein the disaster is known to be very threatening. Okay? And then in the warning phase, this is the period when the disaster is imminent and the warnings is being announced. Okay? We can hear, see government efforts pushing some relocations for those who will be heavily impacted by the disaster. But there are some disaster that we are not being aware of. Okay? And the impact phase. This is the phase wherein the period during the disaster event occurs. And the post-disaster phase includes consolidation phase and then the rebuilding phase. The consolidation phase is the period wherein we immediately follows disasters when individuals are taking a stock of this situation. And then the rebuilding phase is a period wherein people rebuild their lives, trying to be something positive out of the ruins. And later we'll see how people will be impacted with each phases of the disaster. Specifically, the impact of the disaster, especially the impact phase and the post-disaster phase, these are some of the possible consequences. Like for instance, for morbidity and mortality, there are injuries, suffering, there might be disease, even people can be starving, and even death. For material losses, there could be damage to property, destruction, there could be also pollution, there could also be economic impact or economic loss, and there could also be resources depletion. As for the social disruption, there could be disruption of normal activities. There could also be homelessness. People can be displaced. People can experience unemployment. And there could also be experience of civil unrest. Aside from that, there could also be a psychological or psychosocial distress, wherein people can feel hopelessness, helplessness, grief, guilt, and distress. The disaster can impact stress depending on the following factors. So first is the feature of the disaster. We should know if the people are familiar with what happened. Are they experiencing this? Are they naturally experiencing? Parang familiar na ba sila dun sa nangyayari? Meaning to say, baka yung area talaga nila is located in the typhoon belt. Kaya naturally occurring na sa kanila yung typhoon. So we consider that features of disaster, or the people are not familiar with that disaster event. Is the event unavoidable? We try to consider that it's also part of the features of the disaster. Was it sudden? Was it unexpected? And then we try to take a look also the intensity of the disaster. Those are inclusions of the features of the disasters. Second, community or societal factors. Is the event can be controlled? Do we have a control for it? Can we mitigate the impact of the disaster? What are the pre-existing level of the resources of that community or that particular location? What is the level of preparedness of the community? Are there access for resources? What was the extent, or what is the extent of the nature and damage of the disaster? Would it pose political unrest or even social unrest? Now, we try to take a look also, or is there a need for us to rebuild the resources? Lastly, this is part of factors that determine the stressfulness of a disaster is the characteristic of the individuals involved. We need to consider how the people are taking the experience. What are the actual losses? Do they have pre-existing condition which can exacerbate the stress experience? What is the nature and extent of the available support? Do they have social support to begin with? Each disaster has a remarkable influence, and the disaster invariably highlight social inequalities. And the aftermath of the disaster can be somewhat lengthy. Medyo tumatagal siya. The psychological impact of the disaster can be much more pervasive than the physical impact. And now, I might continue. Since we're talking about stress in the light or in the lens of a disaster, let's talk about traumatic stressor. It's any incident that is out of the ordinary for a human being, and it's extremely distressing. We can categorize a potential victims into three groups under level exposure of traumatic events. For instance, for the primary victims, these are the people who are affected by the event. What is the example of this? This could be the typhoon victims, yung nakaranas talaga ng disaster, but caregivers, care providers, rescuers, bystanders, emergency health responders, these could be considered secondary victims, those who observe the consequences of the event. But all that we know, there are also tertiary victims, and these are victims who are indirectly affected by the event as a result of later exposure to the trauma of the primary and the secondary victims of trauma. And these are the tertiary victims. This could be family members of the primary and secondary victims. Okay? Why are we looking at this context? Because there are possible reactions that is expected to be normal or could also be abnormal that can impact either these primary, secondary, or tertiary victims. The possible reactions are extremely complex, and their severity as well as the type vary insignificantly. They are strongly dependent on the individual who is afflicted. Such reactions can range from negative feelings to psychiatric disorders or psychopathology. They go through several stages. Others would expose to a traumatic stressors, experience no reaction or very little reactions to distress. Others could experience moderate distress, and others could experience severe distress. Other stressors in one's life could influence this process, and such responses could also be short term or this could also be long term. Some people recover on their own with their minimal help from others or social network. Others benefit from the services of stress management team, and others require services of professional health to fully recover. By any measure, most people who are exposed to such stressors recover satisfactory levels, but even memories of traumatic event endure, the impact can be considerably diminished in the situation when it is handled properly. Getting the right help can mean difference between a quick and pleasant reaction and a longer, more complex and severe one. So people would react differently in traumatic situation. Maybe some of you have witnessed people who had no reaction to stressors, wherein some people could experience psychological and behavioral sequelae due to the disaster. And this might impact, yan, this might impact also their processing experience. Now, allow me to give to you the possible responses of people with respect to phases of disaster. During the pre-impact phase, there might be preparation for potential impact. Others might be anxious, others might be calm, they are focused, but others might experience being disorganized. In the warning phase, there might be some agitations. They have this tendency to overreact, and others may have this tendency to remain calm. But during the impact phase, we notice that there could also be experience of being afraid, being fearful. There is an actual threat, so they are fearful on it. And some people might tendency to give up. During the post-disaster phase, there are efforts to survive, and then they wanted to fully recover. This sharing experiences and anticipation of hope prevails and continues. But when aid is not coming, negative feelings may prevail. Now, how can we help these people who have been experiencing disaster? There are a lot of techniques to manage stress. But what I presented a while ago is breathing exercises may be a way for us to include in terms of our intervention of stress. But I wanted to introduce to you this evidence-based approach, the psychological first aid, which is a humane, supported, and practical assistance to give to fellow human beings who have recently suffered exposure to serious stressors, that we might be able to use breathing exercises, expressive techniques also to psychological first aid. What is the basic principle of PFA? It meets the basic needs and concerns. It lets give us the disaster experience or those people who experience the disasters provision for comfort and make them calm. It helps them to be connected to information, even to their relatives, okay, who are not in the area of the disaster, gives them also services and social support. And this is not a professional counseling after all. This is not also a psychological debriefing, and this is not for them to analyze the event. The basic principles follows. Yan. I just wanted to share this pyramid. This is the IACS. Wait, IACSC pyramid, mental health and psychosocial support. Those people, there are very few people who will be needing psychosocial services. But the social consideration in basic services like access to food, water, shelter should be given primarily to the majority. And then there should also be strength in terms of community support. And for those who will be needing psychosocial support and clinical services should be linked, okay, to professionals. PEV action principles includes the following: prepare, look, listen, and link. When we talk about preparation, meaning to say we give them an idea of what is happening. Okay? They are entitled to feel safe, entitled to information. We attempt to act with compassion also towards others. We also give them support in terms of their basic needs. That's part of the look principle. We also try to take a look on people who would be needing help for serious distress. And then another principle is to listen. We try to approach people who may need support, ask them about their needs and concern, and try to listen to them and help them feel calm. In this process, the stress management techniques such as breathing exercises, even the meditation, relaxation can coincide. But most of all, the link. The link principle helps people address their basic needs and then access to services. We wanted to link them to agencies, communities that can assist them cope with their problems. And if they needed special assistance in terms of clinical services, we try to connect them with appropriate people. Now, I wanted to share some curated mental health services providers, such as in the national level, we have the National Center for Mental Health Crisis Hotline. And also, I saw several agencies in the Central Visayas that might be helpful in terms of seeking mental health service support in the Central Visayas. So with that, once again, thank you. And I wanted to end with this quote: working through each layer of the self is our key to inner healing. And as care providers, we need also to take care of ourselves so that we could be able to serve other people in times of crisis intervention. Muli po, marami pong salamat sa imbitasyon. Mabuhay po kayong lahat.
And so thank you, Miss, for that wonderful talk. On a short span of time po, marami tayong na-cover in terms of sa mga phases ng disaster, consequences, and kung ano yung mga techniques na pwede nating magawa. So actually, Miss, meron po kaming questions from our audiences. And po, I'll read. For the first one, you mentioned po na there are traumatic events that can bring about a greater psychological impact to a person. Do you think po na all healthcare workers should be trained in psychological first aid?
Hi, hello. Now there are studies to show that in terms of disaster, people, the psychological first aid, by the way, before I begin with, these are not only for people who have the background in psychology or counseling. It's provided that they have the training, there are training provisions for them. They can actually do this to their stakeholders. But as to answer your question, Kenneth, no, we need also a necessary support program for care providers, emergency responders, because they are the first in the line. And during this pandemic, we also notice all the frontliners might have been experiencing some difficulties, no, in terms of coping, during the disaster. Maybe not all, but yeah, the readiness and also the availability of support services would be helpful for all the care providers, because what can you give to others if you cannot start with the self? So that is very important, that we take care of ourselves first. Then it's necessary for us to have this background of managing our stressors, whether it's distress, because distress is the unhealthy part of the negative part of the stressors. Stress can be good and stress could also be bad. And it's also how our bodies and our one personality be able to take on the stressors.
Yes po, actually, yun nga po sa good stressors, mga eustress and distress po natin. And I
Yeah.
also believe po na okay po talaga na maging knowledgeable din po yung mga frontliners natin about handling such stress po and trauma. Now po ma'am, for follow-up question po, how can we make this possible in our country? Which po kasi medyo taboo po kasi or does not really consider mental health care a priority for now. Ayun po.
Actually, yeah, no, I understand you, because even now in the 21st century, that mental health concern can still be stigmatizing. And for us, no, to start to at least mitigate that stigma for mental health is to create awareness and awareness to the self, that it's necessary to acknowledge also our weakness, and then be able to assess ourselves or assess our strengths and our weaknesses, and place ourselves in a manner wherein how can we be able to handle the stressors in our life. So we need all these protective factors. So since it's actually it's interesting that during the pandemic, one benefit was people are becoming more aware of being protective of their mental health as well as their physical health. And if there is one silver lining on the pandemic, is that people are now more being aware of their mental health as well.
Mas nakapag-build po ng insight between everyone po sa atin. No?
Yes, also the Mental Health Act, okay, the law, okay, the mental health that was being a law now has also been very helpful, because it established also resources for the communities and also for the mental health professionals, and that could be a good starting point. And it's relatively new, but it's very promising for the Filipino community.
Okay, Miss, thank you po for answering the questions of our participants.
Thank you very much,
Okay,
Kenneth
so
and Haya.
thank you
Okay,
po.
so thank you, ma'am. So now to present Ms. Tricia with the certificate. So this certificate is awarded to Tricia Joy Gotinga for sharing their expertise on the webinar series Spotlight Season 3, Onwards Together, Outweathering the Storm episode, Crossing the Bridge, Easing Back to Life, held on March 27, 2022 via Zoom. So, ma'am, okay lang po ba may picture taking po? Saglit.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. So ayan guys, this is the last call for you to lock in your registration and try your luck in a raffle draw later. So links again can be found in our chat box. Andiyan pa ba ang mga tao? Okay pa ba kayo
And guys,
dyan?
gising pa ba tayo?
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay, so yan. So medyo mabigat yung mga topics na tinitake on natin. So ngayon magkakaroon ulit tayo ng little break, right Haya?
Yes, exactly. Meron na naman tayong ipapamigay na 250 pesos. So we have another round here on Mentimeter. Guys, scan nyo na yung QR code dyan and then enter the number code. All right, is everyone ready na ba? I mean, let's give them siguro mga 1 minute to scan and then join the game.
Ayan. So guys, naka-flash na sa screen natin yung Mentimeter natin. You can put on the code or scan the QR code on your screens.
Remember guys, official name ang gagamitin, hindi po mga spam names, hindi cutie names. And then for the winner of this icebreaker again, take a screenshot of the Mentimeter leadership board and then send it to the Facebook page of CDU MAOT. Meron na bang participants?
So guys,
Nakikita mo na kayo na?
not yet. Wala pa yung mga heart natin. So let's give a little time.
Yeah. Sige na guys, join na ulit kayo kasi 250 pesos din to. Pang
Oo,
coffee,
another
milk
250 pesos. Sa mga hindi nanalo kanina, di ba, Haya? Pwede pa. Another
Yes.
chance.
Another chance naman. Tapos meron din tayo mamaya sa sa raffle natin, 'di ba? So guys, make sure naka-register kayo.
Oo, kaya yun dun sa mga participants pa natin dito sa Zoom or sa Facebook na hindi pa nakapag-register, go click on the registration link kasi yun yung gagamitin natin for our raffle later.
Ayun na nga. Teka lang.
And let's see, may mga nakapasok na ba?
Wait lang, parang nagkakaroon tayo ng technical difficulties doon sa ating Mentimeter.
Sige, habang nagkakaroon tayo ng technical difficulties, ikaw ba, Haya, what's your main takeaway na so far sa ating webinar?
Ako, ang pinaka-main takeaway ko is, for now, yung consideration of how people actually react to disasters or stressors. Kasi ang ganda ng emphasis ni Ms. Trisha kanina na everyone reacts differently. So you can never really, you can never really tell kapag yung isang tao pwedeng ganito yung reaction niya sa isang simple bagay and then other people might overreact over the same thing, okay? So parang ang sarap pakinggan na marami nga talagang pinagdadaanan yung tao and then you don't judge people on how they react kasi iba-iba nga tayo ng nararamdaman, iba-iba tayo ng coping mechanisms, 'di ba? So may mga iba that they cope well enough through certain events, tapos merong iba rin na they react badly. Ikaw ba? Yung takeaway mo dito sa first two topics natin?
Actually, both of them are very great nga in terms of knowledge. Tapos as a occupational therapy practitioner, parang magagamit talaga natin. Pero same tayo actually ng may takeaway. Parang, parang individual tayo. Meron tayong uniqueness sa pagiging resilient. Parang meron talagang mga bagay na kahit na hindi mabigat sa'yo, mabigat na sa ibang tao. Pero meron din naman na yung mabigat sa'yo, hindi mabigat sa iba. Kaya kailangan talaga nating mas maging aware, mag-build tayo ng sarili natin na para makilala natin yung ibang tao and yung sarili natin. So yan, going back to the game. Tignan natin, meron na po ba tayo mga participants?
Do I see hearts? Parang wala pa yata ako nakikitang heart.
Ayan na, meron na. 17. Ayan, question 1. Let's go. The P in PLLL is... Ano kaya yan, Haya, sa tingin mo? Pero medyo mahirap at ang tanong na to eh. Ayun! Prepared pala yun, hindi ko inasahan yun.
Tricky, ayun. As in. Alright, sino bang leading natin dito ngayon? Wow.
Ayan, Pao, si Pao.
Si Pao na faster. The faster you guys respond, the more points you're gonna get. Ayan, ito, next question.
Ayan, next, the third L in PLLL. Prepare, look, listen, link.
Ito, medyo tricky siya. Kasi tatlong L to.
Oo, kasi tatlo.
Ayun.
It's link.
Link. Tama, for a majority of the people said listen. Okay. Okay lang yan, guys.
Tuloy pa, meron pa tayong ibang questions. Ayan, nag-iba na, nag-shift na yung leaderboards natin. Michelle na ngayon ang nauuna. Fastest answer.
Very nice, Michelle. Third question na to, tama? Ayun, third question. The second L in PLL. Dalawa na lang pagpipilian nyo guys, ha?
Yeah. Ayun, listen. Medyo marami majority sa atin yung nakakuha ng listen ngayon.
Very nice, very nice.
Let's see.
Fourth question. I think this is the last question. Sino na bang nanguna?
We have
Martina
Ayun.
Ligutom. Ayan.
Last question, guys.
Last
Bilis
question.
na talaga to, ha?
Sana lang, hanapin nyo na kung ano yun. Kung sino pa rin mabitlis yung internet, siya yung mananalo dito.
Yun nga, eh. Nagulat.
Ayan.
Alright,
Look, oh, very good. 16 yung nakakuha.
Sino kaya nanalo ngayon?
Parang magkakalapit sila, no, Haya?
Yun nga, eh.
Oh, ayan.
Congratulations, Martina Ligotom. Take a screenshot right now of that leadership board.
So congratulations sa winner. Alright, at this point, Kenneth, ano na bang gagawin natin?
Actually, sa next segment ata natin, parang medyo mag-shift yung way ng webinar natin. I think magkakaroon tayo ng focus group discussion, tama ba?
I believe so. Hindi na natin siguro paantayin pa yung mga audience natin. Why don't we introduce na our next speakers?
Yes. Ayan, for the first speaker, we'll be joined by two guests. Our first guest is a camp administrator at March Village NGO, Bantayan Island. She is also an instructor at the Department of Occupational Therapy, Veles College, Cebu. May I introduce Ms. Maria Minerva G. Lagria, OTRP.
And accompanying her is an occupational therapist who is a trained FEA. She is part of MDRRM in Cagayan de Oro, Bohol, and Surigao. And she also practices home health OT in Florida, USA. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Ms. Joyce Carmel Rosales.
Good morning po, ma'am.
Good morning po. Good
morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning po,
for-
ma'am.
Yes, for our part, Miss Joyce is going to start. I think.
Okay po.
Yeah.
Wait lang.
Yeah.
Can you see my...
Yes,
Wait lang.
Ayan, si Ms. Joyce. We can see the screen now, ma'am.
Okay, wait. I'll do the slideshow. Okay. Okay, hi everybody. It's nice to be talking again about roles of OT and disaster risk response. It has been quite a while since I was practicing about handling the response disaster. Roles of OT, the references for this discussion are from World Federation of Occupational Therapy. I also got this from AOTA, May 2020 article recently for the pandemic. And of course, we have to use Willard and Spackman. in our own OTPF. So starting from the roles of occupational therapy in DRRM, we have to look into the different aspects. We have the mental rehabilitation, physical rehabilitation, and accessibility. So these are essential aspects and stages of disaster preparedness, risk reduction, and humanitarian response. So we have to consider these three aspects when we talk about disaster risk response or risk reduction management. Hello, guys.
Yeah, you're clear,
Yes,
Miss
ma'am.
Joy.
Okay, because I can't see the. Wait, there you go. And then also we have to consider community planning. So community planning, it is important part of your role as an OT because we usually get into the community when we do our tasks. So it incorporates a consideration of action to be taken to avoid the most serious consequences of disaster. So we have the principle of environmental integrity. So it means we have to maintain biodiversity. So we have to consider the different aspects in the community, the different types of people, the different needs. Then we have to sustain healthy ecosystem essential for people's well-being and security. So from the roles of OT, we usually base our tasks from the mental health pyramid. So what stage do we start? Until, so we start with the self-care, we do the community care. So we refer to this pyramid with regards to our response to disaster. So we do preparedness and we do after the disasters. So moreover, we have the different roles of OT. So we have the prioritization of engagement in activity. So of course, as OT, we always base our treatment from our OTPF. So we have the roles, the routines, and occupations of daily living. So everything that you see in the community, OTs has a great role for that. Then we also develop well-being and resilience for individuals and their communities. We reduce people's vulnerability. And then, of course, we increase the preparedness for disaster. So these are some of the roles of OT. We put systems in place for forewarning or impending disasters. So we usually do this during preparedness or pre-disaster. So OTs have roles even there's no disaster yet. And then we also base our approach as a people-centered. So we respect the rights and perspective of people with disabilities. So we also consider the people with disabilities regarding our program or activities that we have to give to the people before and after disaster. So we overcome physical and information barriers that it should be accessible for all. So we have to take note that as OTs, we don't only consider those people who have no physical or mental dysfunction. So we have to consider people with special needs. So that is important also as OT that we have to consider. And then we have to be, it's more on the community base. We have to be part of the strategic planning. So we have collection, measurement, and evaluation. And then we facilitate preparedness planning in geographical areas at risk. So we can see here that the roles of OT and DRRM begins even before the calamity has arrived. So we are very important. And then we also contribute to disability specific risk reduction and capacity assessment through risk and resource mapping. So we do the mapping. So we know where to get help after, and we know what to do after. And of course, because we consider people with disabilities, we have to raise the awareness about it, and we have to build shared commitment among stakeholders. So stakeholders, these are the people that we can go after a disaster or during preparation. So the people that would help us do our plan, our program as occupational therapists. Furthermore, we also provide specialized occupational therapy education and peer training to build capacity. So in this part, it comes when we try to train other people to process, especially with the psychological first aid. So we try to build human resource, because it is not really possible that you're the only one who would help the community. So you have to build up human resource. So this is providing the education and peer training. So we provide education regarding disaster preparedness to individuals, groups, and caregivers. So caregivers, these are important because some of the people in the community have physical dysfunction or other dysfunction. So we have to also take into consideration the caregivers on what are they supposed to do during the disaster. So it is a big role of OT to prepare them, especially the family with that person with special needs. And then we also give education for family disaster plans, kits, and evacuation plans. And we train community members and volunteers. And then we also participate in community planning, testing, and exercises. And then we promote occupational focus. So occupational focus, it means we are leading people right after the disaster to go back to what they were doing or what are the meaningful activities that they usually do. And if not, we have to find another area that they can be, that will be also meaningful to them. And then we also have the last one. We have to encourage community leaders and others in organizing community supports and routines. So a lot of the roles here are based from the study made from the World Federation of Occupational Therapy and recently pandemic IOTA, so American Occupational Therapy Association. So these are not limited because OTs in DRRM is not really needs further studies and researches. So we still have to do more things that would add the roles of OT in DRRM. And then so moving on, since we occupational therapists can give psychological first aid or the PFA, so we need to do a training or certification. But before the psychological first aid was introduced, when OTs go to the community, we develop a certain guidelines to stress debrief the people after the disaster. So it was based from our Cole Group Dynamics book regarding how to handle people after the disaster. And then finally, we move on to the PFA part. So the people who are, or the OTs that do stress debriefing or goes after the disaster undergone such training and certification. And then we follow these principles for PFA. So we have the look, listen, and link. So before the 3 L's, we have to prepare. So OTs also play a significant role in the preparedness. So here are the things that we can do for look, the listen, and the link. So the question here is, the rapid PFA model is also after the PLLL. So this is extending community behavioral health search capacity, meaning we are able to expand the resources that we have. So from the strategic planning at after the disaster, so we have to extend, because we don't only stop, but we have to sustain the community. And then our OT's first line responders. So occupational therapists are first line responders because we give PFA. This is a first line psychosocial support for people affected by the crisis. So we are considered as first line responders. And then recently, the American Occupational Therapy Association have determined roles of OT during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this research was published May 2020. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, the roles of OT can be a consultant role to work with the organization or the communities regarding the person's occupation and client factors dysfunction. Then OTs could also be preparedness context, meaning we have to target or prepare the people that we have to, like, the safety precautions to avoid being contacted with the virus. And then, of course, if our patients have been diagnosed with COVID, so there are a lot of complications right after. So the roles of the OT can be problem solvers. So you have to use the different tools of occupational therapy practice on what is the specific problem of your patient. That's why we have the occupational performance profile, so that you'll have a background of your client. And then another role is, so we help people address their needs related to their occupation during the disaster. So we don't only handle people after COVID, but during the period of the disease. And then we also establish habits and routines that provide structure for a family, promote mental and physical health for the family. And then, of course, we also consider the environment for the person to fully participate and create daily self-care rituals. So all of these roles are based from our frame of references. So these are the things that the OT can do during and after and before no after COVID, if you're infected with the virus. So OTs really have a great role during disaster. It's not only the natural disaster, but also pandemic disasters like this. Like what was mentioned a while ago, the different types of disasters. So OTs can do a lot, but we still need to do some further research about this. So are there a lot of OTs working in disaster risk reduction management? Yeah, Miss Minnie will tell all about those things after, but I'll just have to share this pictures that we have been doing the what were our roles for the DRRM. So we do preparedness, and we also do this is education. So during this time, this picture was taken in Surigao, where we were able to give education to the teachers in the community. And then these teachers will undergo the training for PFA, and they will help us do the psychological first aid for their students. So I was working with Miss Minnie Lagria when this picture was taken. And then we have to do meetings too. And then this one was taken at Naga, this landslide. So the target population for this stress debriefing was aware youth. And then we also cater kids and employees. So another group of kids. And these are the community education too. Then distribution of goods. So the things that the people need. So it's also a role of OTs to determine what are the needs of the community. And Miss Minnie, it's your time to talk about your pictures.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Joyce, for your presentation. So I would like, yeah, that's me. I would like to talk about my experiences working in the community. So right now I work in March Village. I'm the camp administrator. So March Village is a relocation or resettlement camp for those victims of Typhoon Yolanda. And I think you're all familiar with that typhoon, that super typhoon that devastated the country. So next picture, Joyce. Or are there other slides, or that's all? Okay, anyway, so yes, this picture is me doing logistics. So this is vital signs. You know, as an occupational therapist doing frontlining, we don't really have that we don't really have the clear cut OT, like very OT job when you're in the site. What to provide? You can do vital signs. We can do we can do a lot of things. We can even run the children's group, because of course when you are in the site, especially if there's medical missions, or like for this one, I think this picture was when we did the Taal volcano in March, when Taal volcano erupted in March of 2020. So I was also there, and there were so many things that need to be done. And then there was a part of our group was running the medical mission. And so after having done my part, I was in the evenings, I was doing capacity building for some community volunteers. So during the day, I was helping the medical mission team, or I was helping, or rather, if there's a need for the resources group for help, then I would be helping in the distribution of kits, distribution of materials, blankets, clothes, water containers, alcohol, those stuff. I will find myself there. And if there's a need from the surgical team of somebody who can help them sterilize their equipment, then I also find myself there, because when you are in the field, you just have to help, so that the operation of your disaster response group can go on smoothly. And if there's a need for somebody who can do the simple tasks like forming the lines or the helping with the cues, then you have to be there too. So like in this one, we were right across the volcano in this one. So what we did, because the people there were in so much pain, there were no food, there was no proper food for the past few days. So what we did was, I suggested that we have to buy good food and help the people feel abundance despite, or in the midst of the disaster. So, and also after the disaster, we in March Village work on empowerment, we work on livelihood, we work on health, we work on the different aspects as mentioned or elaborated in our WHO CBR guidelines. And right now, I'm just actually talking from the slides that Ms. Joyce has been showing. So these are the blankets. And I will talk further about all this after all the pictures are shown. I would like us to refocus on the pyramid for MHI intervention. So this one also, this was at the height of the pandemic. I think this picture was taken in April of 2020. I facilitated the distribution of PPE in Bantayan Island. So I tried to source out PPEs for Madridejos, for Bantayan municipality, and for Santa Fe. And so, that one is a picture of the ambulance picking up the PPEs. And this one is a picture after Odette. So I went, Bantayan was not really that affected. So I went home here. I'm actually right now in Bohol. So I came home, and then I helped, or I coordinated our disaster response of March for Christ. So there was so much need for building materials. So we brought these GI sheets, we brought water containers, eggs, anything that you can think of to help them right after Odette, because it was only few days after Odette. So here you can see rice. We did prepare health packs, hygiene packs. And so while we are traveling, hindi na siya yung meron kayong isa sa center. No, while we were traveling, we were stopping and giving or handing out food. We were handing out those tin sheets, and yeah, that was what we were doing right after Odette. And so here, I think it was mentioned by the previous speaker about the mental health in Bohol. Yeah, I was part of that group right after Odette also. While I was here in Bohol, I was helping them. I was among the facilitators. So we were working with children in one of the evacuation centers. So here I was with my actually daughter because I want to already expose my daughter at this early stage, working with children after disaster. So here I was working with children. And then this is in another disaster area, and still disaster response for Odette, and this was in Cebu, in Capazar, one community in Cebu, Capazar in Talamban. So we were running a activities for children. We were also helping mothers and children, giving them vitamins, giving them antibiotics. So we brought along with us our own doctor. And so as occupational therapists, we can also help organize volunteers to help in disaster response. So these are international volunteers coming to March village. And what were they doing there? That's a good question. So they were there helping the children. They were there helping us with health. So some of these international volunteers are doctors, nurses, physical therapists, and occupational therapists. So with our expertise, we did our stuff, you know. And this was my first international disaster response exposure, and this was in Sri Lanka. Behind us was actually that infamous train, you know, that had all the that the Sri Lankans thought was a help. So they all boarded in this train while the tsunami was coming. So they were all in this train, and then the water came and toppled this train and killed all of those who boarded in this train. So we were here in, I think this was in Paralia. We were stationed here, and that was my first mental health psychosocial support exposure. And that's when myself and some members of the Department of Health here in the Philippines, we all came up with our first mental health psychosocial support guidelines. So I was working with them, with the DOH representative, and I did not know that we were actually the Philippine representative to Sri Lanka. Okay, now let's go back to this pyramid, because parang nako-confuse talaga tayo. Ano nga ba talaga ang role ng OT? Itong si Miss Minnie, kahit saan saan nakikita mo, parang, am I spreading myself too thinly? Am I just trying to, you know, to help where I can help? Or am I trying to, and not being an OT? So with this pyramid is really very helpful. As an occupational therapist, what can we do in self-care? This first level of the intervention, the self-care, includes the shelter, the food that the community needs, and right after disaster. But I want to talk first before the disaster preparedness, no? So disaster preparedness, before Odette, I think that was 5 o'clock in the afternoon when Odette was still coming. It was already very windy. And I felt the need to go to the Baybayon or the Lampasigan to check on the fishing boats of our fisher folk in March Village. So I had to go there with the other fishermen. And I tell you guys, it was too windy na parang madadala ka talaga nung hangin ba, na you can easily be thrown into the dagat, into the sea. But then we had to cut. Okay, it was really wrong. If the DNR was there, I could easily be imprisoned. But we had to cut some trees so that maipasok namin yung palm boats. Kasi pag masyadong mahangin, you know, with this typhoon, they can easily lose their palm boats or their fishing boats, and they'd lose their livelihood. So I had to be with the fisher folk and facilitate the keeping of tama ba yung term ko, the keeping, para maitago yung kanilang mga fishing boats para hindi madala sa alon, hindi madala sa ano ng hangin, yung kasi alam ko the wind then yung Odette was going to be very very strong, so dapat i-secure lahat. O yun, the term is secure. We have to secure the palm boats, and then on my way back to where I live, we have to pass by the different housing units, the different households, and just make sure that they were doing good, that they were already prepared. So I told them that if there are loose roofs, that they have to secure them. If it's possible to tally with rope, then they have to tally with rope, and then to make sure that all children are already in the houses para when the typhoon comes, they're all secured. And then reminded them that they have enough water, since there was still water, that they have enough water in their households, that they have to make sure that all their water containers are filled with water, and yeah, lahat. And then I think I got home at around almost 7 o'clock, and yun then I have to make sure that they have their tin food, everything. So that's before the disaster. So right after the disaster, wala ka namang magawa, no, during the disaster. So I was just there with some members, with some teenagers who were finding or trying to have refuge where I live. We're just listening to the wind. It was really very scary. And the day after, there was not much anong tawag nito, bigla ko na conscious guys sa time, no, but walang masyadong distraction in March. So March for Christ told me to go to Bohol and then coordinate our organization's disaster response, and that's how I got to Bohol. So yung self-care, so naisip ko, anong gagawin, mag-MHPSS ba ako? So looking back, kailangan guys, we know this pyramid. So no, not yet. We have to do self-care. Mag-MHPSS ka, pagkatapos wala naman silang kakainin, di ba? So it is good to listen to them. It is good to to ask about their experiences, but it is better that you bring food to them, you help them with that. I saw that there were no roofs, so it was good that I March for Christ rented this big truck and filled it with tin sheets, with nails, with trapal, and with food packs and hygiene packs. So yeah, and so I gave out those sheets and food packs for those who need food packs. I'm saying who need food packs kasi meron na namang binigay na mga food packs, but for those na nakita ko na wala namang food pack, or parang kulang yung food pack kasi marami sila sa bahay nila, then we gave those. And I tell you guys, there's one thing, may na-remember lang ako, may isang family nasira talaga yung bahay nila. But then meron pala silang hindi namatay na mga pigs ba. So sabi ko, ba't niyo kinatay yung pig niyo? Sabi nila, ma'am, wala namang bibili nito ngayon. Everybody's hard up. So ang ginagawa namin, we are slaughtering this pig so that among us here in the community can actually share, the meat. It was really very good. No, it was very positive for the Boholanos to do that. So it's not true that Boholanos are ija-ija or aho-aho. And that was really the evidence is that one. So yeah, self-care, yung shelter. Are they having the basic food? I mean, the basic needs like food. Are they fed? Do they have water? Diba yung water dito sa Bohol and other places was very scarce. So yeah, I tell you guys, on my way to Bohol, I had to carry, kasi dadaan man ako ng Cebu, I literally carried with me 11 liters of water. So I had a big water bottle, and I have those small bottles. Yung lahat na luggage ko, ang laman, puro tubig. Kasi I had to daan Cebu. I had to give some to my my siblings. Kaya I have 2 siblings man in Cebu. So I left them those, and kung saan man ako makitulog, at least I have water to clean myself, and I have water to drink, and help them cook food. Ganon talaga ang nangyari, you know? So self-care, we have a role there. We have to help. Then, yeah, the informal community care. So if yung group namin, we came up with a medical mission. Why? Why medical mission? Of course, meron yang magkakasakit, magkakalagnat, magkaka-colds and cough. And then we have to also bring vitamins kasi kulang yung food nila. Then at least it will help boost the resistance and all that. Informal community care, I think yun din when you provide, even your presence, guys, already help, no? So while I was in Bohol, while I was here, I visited like the place like Gindulman. I walked kilometers kasi yung pag sinasabi, nasaan pa dito yung mga na-affected? Nandun lang sa unahan, ma'am. Ay, naku, Mariosep, more than a kilometer pa pala. So, ayun, we brought food, hygiene packs, and then identified sino yung nangangailangan ng mga team sheets. And I was leading the team. So, occupational therapists as leaders in community work. And then mental health services through the primary health care. So, when I joined the group, the LAOM group, that's a mental health group in Bohol, Miss Trish, I was with the team. So in our team, we had the provincial mental health officer. So we had our orientation, then we implemented doon sa mga evacuation centers. So while I was helping, or I was doing MHPSS with the LAOM group, I was also helping one church, empowering the members of the church. So I told them, while we are doing this MHPSS pa rin naman yung magpa-feeding tayo ng mga bata. So we made lugaw, no? Gumawa kami ng lugaw so that after our MHPSS, nakakain din yung mga bata at saka yung mga magulang. So we will doing mental health services through the PHC. We don't do there like, you know, when I was younger, bago pa lang ako dito sa MHPSS, hindi talaga ako nakikiconnect ng mga primary healthcare professionals or organizations. Pero the bad side there is, the downside there is, you will be working in isolation and your work is not sustainable. We want our work to be sustainable. So dapat you really have to do your courtesy call. You really have to work with the rural health unit para your activity will be part of the bigger group. You know, you will be part of the bigger group, not in isolation. Kasi if you work in isolation, pag alis mo, wala na mag-follow up dun sa group mo. So yun, community mental health. And then itong level na ito, yung community mental health services, this is, I think, the non-specialized, the non-focused intervention. So dito tayo papasok yung PFA natin, yung MHPSS natin, yun, dito papasok siya. If you remember your rapid in your PFA, there's a part there in which you do your assessment. Yung mga ma-assess mo na kailangan nila ng specialized, like, so for example, no, like MHPSS ka na, may nakita kang super depressed, iyak ng iyak, or meron kang nakitang iba na talaga, kailangan na talaga ng specialized services. Ayun, you have to write down the name, and then after your MHPSS, you have to refer that person to the specialized services. If hindi lang mental health conditions, but pag nakita kang physical condition naman na talagang malala, nakita mo during MHPSS, then you refer. Or while you're going around the community, may nakita kang may mga problema na kailangan ng specialized services, then you refer them there. Ayun yung sa then you have the long stay facilities and specialized services. So yun. So this is our mental health intervention pyramid. As occupational therapist, we know what we can do, no? You just have to start from the bottom of the pyramid. What can we do as self-care? During the COVID, the height of the COVID, what was my role? Kasi I think there's a question there, no? Kung frontliners ba tayo? Yes, of course. If you're in the community, you are definitely a frontliner. What was I doing in Bantayan during that one? So like what I mentioned earlier, I tried to source out PPEs for the health workers. That's actually frontlining. And then I had to make sure that our community will have our anong tawag yung mga checkpoints. So I organized the community na merong tatao sa mga checkpoints. And then of course, these people who are handling the checkpoints, they need food. So I also had to organize people who can cook in the kitchen and provide the food. And then of course, I cannot do this everything out of pocket. So I had to raise funds and OT raise funds so that all these activities can be funded. Saan naman ako kukuha ng pagkain ng mga lahat ng mga frontliners that I organized, no? So then I managed to get ilang carboys of alcohol para doon sa mga tumatao sa mga namin sa checkpoints namin sa village. And of course, we have health workers in the barangay and the neighboring barangays who did not have actually enough alcohol. So because I managed to get 5 carboys of alcohol, then I had to facilitate the distribution of those. So ayan, when you are in the community, you are a frontliner. Okay, I was actually questioned by the DOH, a person in Bantayan. Ano nga ba daw ang role ko? Occupational therapist ka lang naman. So I said, I am a health worker, and when I'm in the community, if you remember your primary healthcare guidelines, hindi naman ito doktor lang ang gagawa, ito medtech lang ang gagawa, ito no, we have to work together. Meron bang food, meron bang safety water, meron bang ganito, ganyan. So ano ba ang needs that we all health workers can meet for the community? Ano pa yung question? Ayun, so na-answer na ba? If you are an OT, can you work sa DRRM? Can you also be working as a doon sa CBR as a CBR OT? Of course, if you are a CBR OT, you are doing DRRM as well. That is automatic, guys. That is really automatic. And then, as an OT ba, again, I go back, magiging frontliner ka ba? That's actually relative. If you work in the emergency room, I have several friends who are working in the emergency rooms during the pandemic. So they were doing quick assessment kung sino yung ma-discharge, yung mga non-COVID, at saka sino yung i-keep sa hospital. And then for those that they were discharging right away, they have to equip them so that they can be functional when they got back home. Ayun. And for those OTs who are in the ICUs, of course, they work with the specialists, yung mga cardiopulmo OTs, cardiopulmo specialists. Ayun, alam naman natin, guys, I was actually cringing when there was this question that came up na dapat kung meron ba tayong what was that again about OTs working with cardiopulmo OT, kasi wala naman sa curriculum natin. No guys, kahit ba naman nasa FISDIS topic lang yan at naka-insert lang doon sa atin, we have to also major in the minors. Like for example, I know na lang yan sa curriculum natin, it's only part of it was only part of the topic, but I think we have equipped you guys enough na when we have these METs, this level sa METs, this number of METs, ito yung magagawa na activity. So if you're an ICU OT, you know this, and so that you have a role. You're also frontlining there. Ano pa ba yung question? Let me go back to the questions. Am I helping, guys? Am I making sense? So OTs have a big role in the RRM. Yes, I agree to that. Special training is required to be an OT in the RRM. It's common sense. I think you use your common sense. yung sa mga kabatch ko, we've been 5 years in OT school. So there's so much there that we already have learned that we can apply in the RRM. 4 years kayong nag-aaral sa OT, alam ninyo kung anong gagawin sa DRRM. We don't need special training, guys. OTs are considered as first line responders. Yes, relative yan as to kung saan ka na-assign when the disaster happened. If you're in the community, of course you are. If you are in the emergency, yes, you are. If you're in the ICU, yes, you are. Yes, we have a role. We are first line responders. Meron akong funny na information. I was with this Laom group here in Bohol after Odette, and somebody asked me, Miss Vina, ano bang role ninyo sa hospital sa as OT sa hospital during the pandemic? Kasi yung mga OT namin gumagawa ng mga toys, sila yung nagfa-fabricate ng PPE, sila yung gumagawa ng mga ganon. Sabi ko, exactly, you know, we are part of the team sa frontliners. If you think na yung ginagawa naming PPEs, because we know nga na kailangan man, sorry ha, nawala na yung Tagalog ko. We know man na kailangan ng mga staff more PPEs. So we OTs know how to tahi because that's part of our thera skills, right? So that OT that you found there in the rehab, kasi yung mga OT daw sa rehab, nag-busy daw, nagtatahi ng PPE, nagtatahi ng mga dividers para doon sa emergency, and then making toys, working on toys, and gumagawa ng mga mascara. Actually, when I was told that, I'm so impressed doon sa OT sa province ng provincial hospital ng Bohol. Sabi ko, of course, they were doing those mascaras kasi they want to relieve the children. They are giving interventions to the children na nagka-COVID and nasa hospital. Para ma-relieve sila from the stress. Bakit daw nagawa pa ng program, gumagawa ng program, nagpapatawa sa mga staff. Sabi ko, ano bang mga tanong yan? So yun yung ginagawa ng province OT sa Provincial Hospital ng Bohol. Nakaka-proud sila. OTs and DRRM have been around for a while. Are we around? Kasi yung myth natin ba na ang OTs ay pag FISDIS lang, adult, FISDIS PEDS, mental health adult, mental health PEDS. Kaya right after or sa CBR nga natin, parang outpatient lang din tayo pag nagsi-CBR kasi we go there, we look for people who have disabilities. Yun lang ang i-manage natin. No, we have to get out from that box. That's why yung mga OTs parang bago lang tayo dito, guys, right? Because we got so stuck with that na dapat stroke lang, spinal cord injured lang, or yung may mga head injuries na i-handle ko. I have been in this team sa March for Christ even before I became an OT, disaster response. Nung una kampante pa ako kasi I know man how to do the vital signs. Nung naging OT na ako, parang anong role ko dito sa disaster response? I was also like that. So dapat maghanap ako ng nung taong na stroke, taong na spinal cord injury, taong may head injury. So yung first few mission trips ko na OT na ako, parang I was lost. Parang ano bang gagawin ko dito? Am I wasting my time? Then later I understood na oh no, I can actually help organize yung mga hygiene kits, yung mga food packs, yung mga, and then sit with those people who are waiting for their turn and then talk to them, listen to them, So yan, so we OTs have not been around the RRM for a while because we got so stuck in our box na dapat FISDIS, pedia, adult, mental health, pedia. Pagkatapos yung mental health pa natin, dapat yung nandoon tayo sa SOTO, nandoon tayo sa mental health na facilities pa, nandoon lang sa loob, or So, but ngayon, na-realize natin na, we can do PFA, we can do MHPSS. like right now I do counseling. I OT counseling naman, because we are part of our curriculum, we also have that counseling. And in Velas College, we actually expose our students several hours to do counseling through our group dynamics activities. um there are a lot of OTs working in the RRM, additional backup statements. Ngayon, meron na, because we are very aware of that. There are only few differences between OTs who work in the RRM and CBR. I tell you guys, I disagree. Kasi if you are working in CBR, you're also doing your DRRM. You are doing, it's actually DP, RRM, disaster preparedness, and then your response, no? So OT is qualified to do psychological first aid. There's no clear cut kung sino lang talagang magawa ng PFA. PFA is for everyone. So long as they get the training, they get the orientation, then they can do PFA. Yung WHO PFA, yung preparation, look, listen, link. You need to read WHO training manuals about this. Then you can do your MHPSS. You can look into the WHO guidelines sa MHPSS. Meron ding sa Red Cross, meron ding sa INE. There's so many materials out there. And then there's several groups here in the Philippines who are doing MHPSS until now and PFA. In Cebu, we have the well-being cluster, of which March MHPSS is part of, which some of our meron ding well-being cluster, and then we have the March for Christ, and then in Bohol we have the Laom group, then we have Rafi also. So you just have to look out for announcements, because sometimes they need volunteers, and then volunteering actually give us that experience and give us the opportunity to develop our skills in these areas. So ayun, sorry, nag-overtime ako. That's a danger when I don't do the PowerPoints, because then I get the liberty to talk. So guys, thank you so much for inviting me, and I really hope that you learn from that.
All right, thank you so much, Miss Mimi and Miss Joyce. That was very inspiring for the both of you. And I think our audience has learned so much that OTs are not only working in rehab hospitals, but also in DRM. And we do take role in that. So for follow-up, we just have, I guess, one question. So the question for the both of you, and ano na lang siya. What are the challenges that you faced as an OT working in DRRM, and what advice would you give for future OTs that would want to work in DRRM?
Miss Joyce, you want to answer that?
I can give some.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges that we have like encountered in working in a community in DRR is that it's hard for us to like look for the stakeholders, the people, and it's also hard for us to penetrate in the community, especially when we start to talk with them, because they have been suffering from the disaster. So it's hard to like build a rapport. So that's I think the hardest part. And then of course, based from our experience, it is hard because not all of the medical people or the healthcare workers are aware that OTs have a big role in this setting. So some kind of were like discriminated on why are you here. So those are the two things that I think the hardest when we deal with the RRM.
Okay, as for my experience, there was one setback while we're in Surigao. We were doing MHPSS, but then when the National Office of DOH heard that we were there, doing MHPSS, there was actually a reaction, so that DOH National sent their team right away to Surigao. And then while they were in the airport, just when they got out from the plane, I got a call and I was asked, what are you doing there? It's like short of saying, who told you to do MHPSS? Kami lang ang pwedeng gumawa niyan. So I think that was, yun lang yung pinaka-big challenge na meet ko when in the DRRM, I mean, while working in DRRM or immersed in DRRM, parang I was so shocked. And in meetings, we were scolded, we were put down kasi nga sila lang ang dapat gagawa noon. So what we did, like what March for Christ is doing, and meron na naman kaming March PSS, instead of showing resistance to that, yun yung reason why we are now part of Wellbeing Cluster, because with Wellbeing Cluster, siya yung parang you get that protection ba, because Wellbeing Cluster is a umbrella group for mental health services in the Visayas. In the Visayas ba or national group? Nationally, I'm not sure. Is Hannah here? Hannah should know. She was contacted first by Wellbeing Cluster before kami pumasok sa Wellbeing Cluster. So anyway, so yan, that solves the problem. Kasi with Wellbeing Cluster, nandoon din si DOH. So when we introduce ourselves as Velas College or March PSS, and then we say we are part of Wellbeing Cluster, then wala na siyang problem. So we don't need to be resistant all the time. We don't need to be ma-pride. Pero nung una, di ba, Joyce, we were so proud, like, bahala sila, nik nila. Tayo yung nauna kasi actually sila yung unang tinawag ng Surigao to come and help them. But then there were, with the bureaucracies, they need to have their allowances, all those things, all those paperworks. Totoo naman, if you're in the government, there's so many things that you need to do bago ka makaalis. So ang ginawa ng Surigao, they called March for Christ. So March for Christ, they called us, say, on a Monday. On a Tuesday, Monday night, I organized the team, Miss Joyce, Sir Ray, and the other OTs in Cebu. And then I think the following day, overnight kaming nag-work ng guidelines namin, collected mga toys, collected arts and crafts materials, and then the following day we flew. As in, madaling araw we flew.
Our own intervention for children, adults.
Yes. Yes. We work on our own guidelines. We had the Sri Lanka guidelines, but then of course we had to adapt it to the needs of Surigao. And we did that. And I tell you guys, in 2 weeks, we managed to train more than 1,000 teachers, guidance counselors, and guidance and meron bang parents? Basta we had more than 1,000. 8 lang kami. Walo because 4 per week. Yung first week namin, 4 na therapists. Then of course, we had our jobs. We sneaked out from Velas College. We even got our salaries deducted kasi even if we got somebody to cover us, nakita kami sa ABS-CBN ng president ng Velas. So, ayun. Anyway, hindi kasi kami nagpaalam. Ayun. So the second week we had I had with me again another 4 OTs. So together we trained more than 1,000 educators, teachers, principals, and then guidance counselors. And we adapted the multipliers. That will be another topic. So yeah, yun yung accomplishment namin in 2 weeks. Ayun. And then yun yung difficulty namin, yung bang if you are not part of a bigger organization, and I think I mentioned that earlier also, that you need to be part of a bigger group para magiging sustainable siya and maiwasan yung problema. And then yung basic natin sa CBR na when you go to other community or when you do an activity, you need to have your courtesy calls. tingnan natin kung sino yung pinakataas-taasan na posisyon dito sa group na to, sa hospital na to, you have to go see the person. Or in this community, sino yung kapitan, or if in this town, sino yung mayor. So you have to see the mayor, you have to see the MSWD, you have to really see the key people. It takes time, but it's worth it kasi it's for sustainability. Hindi sa papasok ka lang sa isang community, do your thing, and then alis. Meron silang mga programs so makaka-hurt ka ng program sila, makaka-offend ka nila. So, ayun yung mga earlier blunders namin. But now I've learned. Thank you guys for that.
Thank you po for answering that question. I believe there is so much to be done in order to overcome more challenges, lalo na po sa practice natin of OT and disaster risk management. So thank you again po, Ms. Joyce and Ms. Minerva, for such an inspiring talk, and hopefully it will inspire other OTs to be able to work in disaster risk reduction management as well. So
Ay guys, sorry. Meron ako nakalimutan. Is it okay to share this? Last na lang. I know my students there are laughing at me. Ganito talaga ako. Last na lang. Sa Veles College, I want to share this with you. You might learn from this also. When the disaster came in September, it came in March. Then sa September, we did PSS sa lahat ng, starting September of 2020, sa lahat ng students ng Veles, first year to fourth year internship, all year levels, all sections, we scheduled them and we did MHPSS, and it's the occupational therapy department in collab with a guidance counselor. So, ayan. So, na-practice namin within Veles College ang MHPSS skills natin. So, ayun lang.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Miss. And I hope maraming natutunan yung ating mga audience. So thank you po once again. So to present po the certificate. Ken. All right, so this certificate of appreciation is awarded to Ms. Joyce Carmel Rosales for sharing their expertise on the webinar series Spotlight on Air Season 3. Together, Onwards Together, Outweathering the Storm episode, Crossing the Bridge, Easing Back to Life, held on March 27, 2022. And then, Ms. Joyce, is it okay po una tayo for photo op?
The host stopped me to start my video
Host?
because the host has stopped it.
Wait lang po.
Oh, there.
Yes, the host.
Yan.
Ayan. Ayan pa, sige, picture. Okay. Next,
For the next certificate po, the certificate is awarded to Ms. Maria Minerva, webinar series, Spotlight Season 3, Onwards Together, Outweathering the Storm, episode Crossing the Bridge, Easing Back to Life, held on March 27, 2022 via Zoom. Okay, Ms. Mini, okay lang po ba for photo op? Ayan. 1, 2, 3. Smile po. Ayan, okay.
thank you so much to our distinguished guests. So now, are you guys ready for what's next? Okay, guys, so magkakaroon tayo ng
Okay,
raffle
next
draw.
natin, Haya.
May raffle draw tayo because now is actually the moment everyone has waited. I hope you guys locked in your registration. So here's what's gonna happen, guys. We're gonna be spinning the wheel, and then after once the name has been called, you have exactly 10 seconds to clock in your claim. So mag-chat kayo sa Zoom namin na present kayo, make your presence known. Sa Zoom or FB pala. So ayun. So 10 seconds guys, that's all we're giving you. If hindi kayo maka-comment or maka-react within 10 seconds, then we will have to waive your reward and spin the wheel again.
Nako,
Ready? First draw.
Ayan, for the first one, ang nanalo ay si Sir John Allen and Bokuren. And next raffle tayo.
Sino kaya to unang mananalo?
So the raffle prizes pala guys, meron tayong
9.
ipapamigay na mga Euphoria candles, Mucho Cafe, PTS Bubble Tea Station, and GCash yung final price natin na 500 pesos. Ayan. And for the fourth place winner, the one who will be receiving the Euphoria candles, ayan, Miss Mariel Tolentino. Ayan si Miss Mariel Tolentino from Tech. Please
Confirm na ba si
confirm.
Miss Mariel? Confirm na ba?
Ayan, confirm na. Next one.
Okay, congratulations, Miss Mariel. So the next award is for the
Ayan, that's for Miss Kalilim Jovila L. Okay, that's one for the Euphoria candle, the other Euphoria
Confirm na
candle.
ba?
Congratulations,
Did you claim
Miss
it now?
Kalilim. Alright, nag-confirm po ba?
Walang
No
confirmation,
acknowledgement
guys.
yet. So spin again. Alright, Miss Mimi and Miss Joyce, thank you po for staying with us. Okay po. Thank you po for that wonderful talk. Ingat po kayo dyan. Okay, for the next winner po sa raffle, si Raymond Ian Rodriguez. Good night po, Miss Joyce. Oh, yan. Nag-confirm na si Sir Ian. Present. There. Okay, next one for Mucho Cafe Certificate.
Next draw na tayo. Next draw.
Yes, Aya.
Alright.
Okay, ang nanalo ay si Jonathan Ogates PTRP. Ayan, please confirm if nandito pa po kayo sa ating webinar. Okay guys, don't forget to acknowledge and send us a message para maklaim nyo po if ever ha. Okay. May nag-acknowledge po ba?
Parang wala pa ata.
Wala pa. Okay. Next one.
Moving on.
Okay, this is still Mucho Cafe. And the winner is Chanela Entise.
Confirm na ba natin? Miss Shanila? I'm sorry.
Ayan, nag-confirm na si ma'am.
Ayan.
you
So,
won Mucho Cafe.
congratulations.
Voucher. Next one. Two
Next one
BTS
will be
vouchers.
two BTS vouchers. This is milk tea ha. So, sa mga lactose intolerant, pick the other
Ayan.
brand here. Miss
Ang nanalo
Kyla
ay si Miss
May,
Kyla May.
Mangalindan. Ayun,
Ayan, nag-confirm din.
ang bilis naman nito ni Miss Kyla talaga.
Ang bilis sumigot ni Miss Kyla.
Congratulations. And then, final,
Okay,
I think
Haya,
nasa
ano
last
tayo
draw
next
na
natin?
tayo.
Yeah?
This is the last draw, tama? Okay, final draw is
Final draw is 500 pesos sa Gcash. Marian D. Frias.
So, congratulations, ma'am. Nandito pa ba kayo? Kindly acknowledge. Nasa Facebook Live. Nag-comment na siya. Wala po ba, Miss Marian? Wala daw.
Ayan, so si Miss Marilu Kengseng. Parang feeling ko nanalo din ata si Miss kahapon. So, masyadong maswerte. Paambon naman po, ma'am.
Ayun!
Ay, wait. Let's wait for Miss Kengseng muna. If hindi na acknowledge ni ma'am, ibibigay natin siya sa previous natin. Kasi nag-acknowledge na ata siya on Facebook.
Meron siya sa Facebook ata, oo. So, sige, congratulations po sa mga winner. I think we'll consult with kung paano yung distribution natin ng ano.
Yeah.
Oo.
Okay.
Move on muna tayo. All right. So before anything else, guys, we would like to thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. And before we say our closing remarks, we would like to invite everyone on our webinar series on April 2, Wonders of Wellness. Wow, for a healthier you.
And on April 3, feel at home, meeting your child's needs within your home.
So it was an eventful morning naman talaga, no, Ken?
Oo, actually marami nga tayong natutunan in terms of COVID, disaster preparedness, tapos yung mga techniques na pwede nating magawa in terms of stress.
Ayun na nga. And I hope all of our audience enjoyed our webinar series for today. Yesterday din, actually.
Yeah,
So
and ayun nga
there's
guys,
still a lot
ini-invite
to
namin
come.
kayo sa next webinar natin. So it will be the same as this one and there will be a lot of prizes then. Right, Haya?
Yes, there will be prizes then, I believe. So to close up, may we request everyone present pa, if you are there, to open up your cameras and hold for a minute or two. We'll just be having a small photo up. Tapos reminder lang guys, kindly fill up the feedback form. So it's found in the chat box so that you can receive your certificates. Ayan.
Okay,
All
picture.
right, holding 1, 2, 3. Shot. Next. Another 1, 2, 3. Next. All right.
All right,
Thank
I
you so
think
much.
we're
We would
finished.
like to thank our participants for staying with us through the end. Maraming salamat po. And to our generous sponsors for this season's webinars. It wouldn't be possible without you guys. We would also like to thank and express our gratitude to each and every member of the team that made this success.
And to those who won their prizes, kindly message your screenshot to CDU MAOT's Facebook page to claim your prizes.
All right. And that marks the end of our activity, guys. Thank you so much to everyone. Again, we are your hosts. My name is Haya.
And my name is Ken.
And thanks for tuning in on Spotlight on Air.
Thank you, guys.